What happens is that they give it to all these institutions, and they have all the pieces now for the solution, but because of the licensing, they can't put the drug together because they don't have the cost, or the universities won't connect to each other, they won't share the data. And even though all the money is coming from one entity, the result cannot be put back together again, mostly because of small legal things. And so these rare disease organizations approached us and said, can you help us try to standardize this? And George Soros and his group did this conference, which what they call the Budapest Declaration about Open Access, which is also another initiative to say that academic and educational material should be open for access. It should not be closed. The problem is that we have another project called CC Learn, which is also more on the educational materials. We found that even though you think it's open, when you actually read the document, it's not very open. So many of the databases, about half of the databases in the United States, even when they're being licensed and shared, there are little clauses inside that say, and you cannot index these, or you cannot run a program in this. And so, in fact, the very sort of tragedy of this is that the researchers want to share, the funders want to share, the universities want to share, but because the licenses, again, I don't want to blame lawyers, but the people who have written the contracts have added little clauses that are different in each of these things. There's created a friction that makes it almost impossible. And so actually the US NIH and also the NSF and all of these government granting organizations have also started to create these networks for people to share their databases, but because of small technical problems and small legal problems, these databases aren't coming together. And we're just realizing now that we have all this advanced technology that now the main hurdle is not the technology, it's actually the law. And we've also found that some of our standardization technology can be used for things that aren't just database data. This is our Uniform Biological Material Transfer Agreement. This is for exchanging things like mice and cells and proteins and things like that, and we realize that they also have a very difficult time standardizing their agreements. They have to have a separate contract with a lawyer involved for every single transfer, and there's very little incentive for one research organization to give samples to another research organization. So what we did was we created a system so that you can say, okay, this can be used for clinical purposes or not. Can you copy this or not, commercial use or not, just like our copyright licenses. And we created a method so that the biolab keeps track of every time somebody gets a sample, what papers resulted from the sample and what research resulted from the sample, so that once, if you've created a sample, before there was no incentive for you to give the sample to other researchers, but now we've created a system so that at the end you can create a report that you can give to the head of your university or your funding agency saying, in addition to these papers we wrote, the samples and the data that we use or we created also caused this much other work to be created and has been referenced by this other people. So just like you reference documents, we've created a way to reference the use of biological samples. But this is, again, what we're finding is this standardization of the legal layer works not just in content. And this last example is kind of an interesting example. So Paul Allen, who was one of the co-founders of Microsoft, created a huge database with about $100 million, which are these images of the brain of a mouse. And the little colors are the genes which affect which portion of the brain. But no one used this database because it was very difficult to navigate. And it was a huge amount of work, but not that much use. And so what our team did was we had a lot of open source software now on the science side to try to put these kinds of databases together. In addition to the technology, we've created the technology for hooking up different databases. And so we took all these images and we put them into a system, and then we used Google Maps so that you can zoom and use your mouse and zoom in and scroll and use the Google Maps interface. This completely broke the Google Maps terms of service. But we went back to Google Maps, and we also went back to Paul Allen and said, see, this is very useful for researchers. You need to loosen up your copyright and your terms of service to allow this kind of open innovation to happen, because we'll give this technology away, but many students and many amateurs, and these kinds of things should be shared. Because the way that the web has happened is that people create these tools, create these ideas, and everyone shares them. But in the academic world, we found it's very difficult to get these people to share. And the good thing is both of these organizations came back and adjusted their terms of service to allow this kind of innovation. And I think they were convinced that allowing outside people to do this sort of thing was a good thing. And as I mentioned before, we have, in addition to the science side, we have this project with the Hewlett Foundation called CC Learn. And CC Learn is, so I don't know if you know the Hewlett Foundation, but it's a US foundation, and they've been investing a lot of, granting a lot of money to make open educational resources and open courseware. And this is for universities and also smaller K-12 schools to create courses and share them with each other. Examples, MIT is one of the leaders, but they created courseware that is now being used in Vietnam and being taught in Vietnamese. But like business schools are great because you may create a body of, let's say, case studies from Jordan, and you license them on the internet under open courseware. And then my university, Hitotsubashi in Japan, may translate them into Japanese, and we may add some more, and then somebody may come back, and then we'll start to find. And so working, we find educational institutions working together has become a very important thing. But we've also found that we'll be producing a report soon, but the majority of schools that think they're doing something open, actually, if you look at the legal code, it's actually not as open as they think. And also, it's very difficult to search, and there aren't very many good tools for researchers. So the Hewlett Foundation has asked us to create a project to try to make a portal and to create the searching mechanism, and also to help all these institutions with the licenses so that this works together. So kind of in conclusion, we have Creative Commons, which is basically a nonprofit organization that's been funded to create these core licenses, and Ziad and Shadi and your group is working very closely with that team, and this is really the nuts and bolts of the core. But we're finding now that many institutions are funding us to do these things that are either similar or related to these areas. So these are other areas that we would like to explore with you as they develop. They're primarily focused in the United States now, but interestingly, I think they, especially in this region where you're investing in science and technology and you're investing in education, these things may actually be a very important driver for connecting and sharing resources, both inside of the Arab world and also with the outside. And I'm working very hard on bringing Japanese educational material to the Arab world. Right now, mostly focused on Dubai, but maybe from today, I can focus on bringing some collaboration to Jordan. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank you, Mr. Joey for this valuable presentation. We will open the ground for questions and discussions in the end of the conference.
Okay, you can
now
please undifuse the voice.
I will give the speech to Mr. Ziad Maraka. Mr. Ziad Maraka is in charge of the legal cases and court decision department in Talal Abu-Ghazaleh organization, the regional office. He was the regional manager of Talal Abu-Ghazaleh Legal. He is a certified legal consultant and holds a master's degree in commercial law from Sussex University, United Kingdom. In addition, he earned a bachelor law degree from Beirut Arab University, Lebanon. Mr. Marka has extensive knowledge in the protection of well-known marks and trademarks on the internet, the domain names, and the international dimension of cybersecurity and domain names and intellectual property law. Mr. Marka has participated in several workshops, most notably the workshop on protection of intellectual property rights in Bahrain 2004, and another workshop on protection of copyrights on the internet in Jordan 2004.